Welcome back to ADHD Whiskey. My name is Matt, and today we're talking about 5 bourbons that are great for beginners. If you asked 10 different bourbon enthusiasts the best way to start your bourbon journey, you're going to get 10 different answers. Not everybody agrees on the best way to get introduced to bourbons. And I'll say this right now, a lot of you aren't going to agree with me. A lot of you are going to be like, Matt, you dumb. But guess what? Don't care. Because guess what? Don't care. But before we get into my thought process on this matter, let's talk about something that really matters. Today's video sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by our brand new channel sponsor, ZBiotics. What in the heck is ZBiotics, Matt? Glad you asked, Matt. ZBiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink that breaks down the byproduct of alcohol that is most responsible for rough mornings after drinking. You heard it here first. When you drink, a toxic byproduct builds up in your unprepared gut. But ZBiotics will make that gut prepared. What I'm holding in my left hand is truly science. Luckily, using ZBiotics doesn't take a scientist. All you have to do is drink this tiny little bottle of ZBiotics before your first drink of alcohol. Drink responsibly, pace yourself, get a good night's sleep, and then spend the next day feeling great. Yeah, ZBiotics. Yeah, science. And guess what else? If you're not satisfied with it, 100% money back guarantee. They guarantee you'll be satisfied with their product. If you're watching this video, then I think it's safe to assume that you do enjoy having a drink or two once in a while. So if ZBiotics interests you, then click on my link in the description box below. Use code ADHD at checkout and you'll save 15% off your first order. A lot of people believe that a lower alcohol percentage means less burn, but I don't necessarily think that's true. I just don't think it's true. I think the lower the alcohol percentage, the more water was added to that whiskey. And what happens when you add water to whiskey? It starts tasting more like water and less like whiskey. I believe that those introductory 80 proof bourbons, most of them anyway, reduce the delicious flavors of the bourbon while keeping the astringency of the alcohol. So introducing somebody to a cheap 80 proof bourbon, all they might taste is alcohol. But introducing somebody to a slightly higher proof bourbon, they're still going to taste that alcohol, but the bourbon flavor is secured. So the sooner they get past that alcohol burn, the sooner they get acclimated to the taste of that alcohol, the sooner they will be able to start tasting the delicious flavors inside the whiskey. Introduce somebody to something 80 proof and icky, then after they get acclimated to the alcohol burn, they start tasting something that's just not that good. I'm not even against giving a beginner a sip of barrel proof whiskey. Just a tiny little sip like you're sipping an extra hot cup of coffee, and let those flavors go crazy inside the mouth. But maybe we won't go that crazy today. Not with these 5 anyway. So if somebody was just getting into bourbon and said, Matt, show me 5 bottles that I should buy that will help me understand bourbon. Here we go. Number 1 on my list for bourbon for beginners, Elijah Craig Small Batch. Elijah Craig Small Batch from the Heaven Hill Distillery, 94 proof, and is somewhere between like 8 and 10 years old. This is what I would consider to be the standard of bourbon. This is a great bourbon in general, but a fantastic bourbon for beginners to know what the heck bourbon even is supposed to be. This is Kentucky bourbon. Next up on my list is another Kentucky bourbon, but a little bit different. The Elijah Craig Small Batch is made with corn, rye, and malted barley. The other most popular way to make bourbon is with corn, wheat, and malted barley. And the most famous wheated bourbon on the planet, Janet? Maker's Mark. So this Maker's Mark 101 is a more flavorful expression from their distillery than their typical entry Maker's Mark, and is very different than the Elijah Craig. A bottle of Maker's Mark 101 for a beginner will show the difference between a wheated bourbon and a standard bourbon that's made with rye. Will a brand new palate be able to tell the differences? Probably not. But as you get acclimated and your palate starts to develop a little bit, you'll begin to understand the differences. You'll be able to go back and forth between the 2 pours to understand the different flavor profiles. So, Maker's Mark 101. Number 2 on my list. The 3rd bottle on my list is going in the opposite direction. The Elijah Craig Small Batch was made with corn and rye. The Maker's Mark was made with corn and wheat. This bottle, number 3 on my list, Four Roses Single Barrel is made with corn and a lot of rye. This is a high rye bourbon. High rye bourbons are typically more spicy than the lower rye versions and much more spicy than a wheated bourbon. Not all the time, but typically people who love American whiskey will fall in love with bourbon before they fall in love with an actual rye whiskey. Rye whiskey is just extra spicy and not as approachable as bourbon, the sweeter of the two. So this is just offering a third flavor profile to your bourbon collection right off the bat. Four Roses Single Barrel is a great high rye bourbon for beginners that also falls under 50 bucks. Number 4 on my list is a bourbon that I've talked a lot about recently, but I believe would be maybe one of the best bourbons for beginners. This is an 84 proof offering, but is packed full of flavor and is ultra approachable. My list would not be complete if I didn't include Tin Cup 10 Year. This bourbon's a product of Indiana. It was distilled and aged in Indiana for 10 years and then was bottled by Tin Cup in Colorado. This extra flavorful 84 proof bourbon will show the beginner bourbon drinker what oak is all about. Once you get acclimated to the alcohol and you're able to start hunting around for different flavors, this is a great bourbon to show you what a little bit of age does, what a little bit of extra oak does to a bourbon, and could possibly be maybe the best bourbon for beginners. Maybe the best one. Could be the best one. And my 5th and final bourbon for 5 bourbons for the beginning bourbon taster, or bourbon enthusiast, or bourbon enjoyer, or bourbon newbie, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, is the highest proof offering and one that has one of the most distinct flavor profiles. This one doesn't break the bank either, coming in at about 25 or 30 bucks. It's Old Grandad 114 from the Jim Beam Distillery. If you're super new to bourbon, you're gonna wanna go a little bit easier on this one because it is higher proof. This isn't barrel strength, but it's getting there. It's getting there. Aside from the higher proof and the low price, one of the reasons that I say that this is a great bourbon for beginners is because of the flavor profile. The very first tasting note I got on any bourbon, after I became acclimated to the alcohol, of course, after the alcohol burn subsided and I was starting to look for different flavors that these crazy whiskey tasters said that they were getting in their bourbon, the very first note I ever got was nuts. Peanuts. I think that that's one of the easiest things to get. I think that the nutty flavor profile is the easiest flavor profile to pick up on, and that's what this is. One nutty son of a gun. It's one nutty son of a gun. If you're just beginning your bourbon journey and you're like, I have no idea what these people are talking about. I can't taste nothing. All I taste is whiskey. Give Old Grandad 114 a shot and start thinking about nuts. And I bet you'll be able to pick up on it. And if not, you can call me nuts, because I kinda am. I'm a little bit nuts. I'm going to start making more videos about whiskey tasting and how to get into whiskey tasting, because I get asked about it a heck of a lot. A heck of a lot. People are asking me, how do you do this and how do you taste that? Well, maybe I'll just start making some more videos about that. Thanks for watching this video. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below. What was your favorite bourbon as a beginner? What was the bourbon that made you fall in love with bourbon? What was your experience like? Just curious. Just curious. My name is Matt. This is ADHD Whiskey, and like I always say, keep your head in the clouds but your mind on being a beginner at something and then getting better at it. Or quitting it and stop doing it forever. But probably focus on continuing it if you like it anyway. If you don't like it, don't continue. But don't give up just because you're a beginner. You know what I mean? Everybody starts somewhere. Nobody's a professional at something the first time they do it. Nobody's the best at something the first time they do it, no matter what it is. It takes practice, it takes time. So maybe that just means sipping more whiskey if you're a newbie. Maybe that just means that. I don't know. Don't give up just because you're brand new at it. That's silly. That is so silly. If it's something you're interested in and want to do, then pursue. And that's gonna be a new t-shirt. Gonna make a t-shirt. Pursue. Unless of course you're told to stop pursuing. In which case I would stop so you don't get into trouble. If this video seemed awkward at all, if I seemed off or weird, It's because I'm shooting it in the middle of the day with my children running around being crazy people. And I've had to stop shooting it about 1,000 times to ask them to quiet down, to calm down. And it just has not worked. This short video took so long to make. So long. Well, until next time, so long.